Okay, well, let me make sure I take these topics off the list today. I can't make any references.
I really liked your post though about the data wheel thing. That was really good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I figured you might have brought that up. I mean, it's just a lot. It's a lot in there. I mean, there are layers in that whole saga, and I mean, it definitely is something that therapists and behavioral therapists can talk about and discuss and can pull from that, and just everyday people can pull from that because I guess one of the things that I've been thinking about in the past couple of days is how people who have very high EQs are also people who are uniquely positioned to manipulate people. So a lot of times we look at people who have high EQ. Oh, I am? Oh, my bad. Oh, okay. I'm just over here getting I'm over here getting waxing philosophical. And you're like, yeah, you're live. So I'll let
And
you run it. I'll let you run it, ma'am. I'm just gonna sit back and be quiet.
welcome, Facebook. You just kind of caught a little snippet or a preview of the conversation with Desmond and I. This is just kind of how we flow on a regular basis. So this is not a performance for this evening. Desmond is always good for having a very thought-provoking conversation, whether on or off social media. So I was gonna do the introduction of myself first, but since he's here, we've already started talking about him. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Desmond Hardy, who is an awesome friend of mine. We've been knowing each other for a couple of years now. I've only been in Georgia for what? Right at 3 years, a little over 3 years now. So I've known him for about 2 years of that time. Desmond definitely has a wide and extensive resume, but just to sum it all up, he's a writer, he's a philanthropist, he's a technology consultant, a mentor, a youth advocate, and a podcaster. And anyone that follows Desmond knows that he's definitely going to challenge you. He's definitely going to make sure that you're someone that can always challenge your mind and your perspective on things. He's very big on talking about, the major social issues. And so tonight, the social issue that we're going or topic that we're going to discuss is mental health and men. We're going to get the male perspective. And I think it's great because it's important for us to keep the conversation going. Anybody that knows me, and this is of course segueing into just telling a little bit more about myself. I am a therapist by trade. I like to consider myself a healing therapist because I'm very, very big on healing of the heart more so than the mind. But I do believe that heart healing will, of course, help stabilize you in your mental health. I have been able to develop the skill set of focusing on areas in trauma and addiction recovery. My primary demographic, because I have a very, very unique calling that tends to raise a lot of eyebrows, is my calling is to men. So that is why a lot of times you will see a lot of things that I will do, including this week, where I am targeting the male audience. Because one of the things that I've learned in my work experience is the importance and the strong need for men to heal. And so God has given me the gift of healing and to work with men. I know a lot of people, again, don't always find that to be, the popular thing, but it's okay. I know that I'm still getting accepted and embraced in that area. But
And it's better for you to be helping to heal those men than for the men for the women in their relationships to be working on healing them.
yes,
That is not what those women are called to do.
right, because that's going to be one of the things that we talk about this evening is why. Because there are some things that men deal with that a lot of them carry from childhood to
Mhm.
present day that those are the type of issues that can be too hard for anyone that's not really experienced in that particular vein to help
Absolutely.
someone else help through. And that, again, a lot of it does entail traumatic experiences, which then segues into other issues such as addiction. And of course, we know that addiction is not limited to just drugs and alcohol. So it's just being able to even understand that addiction can come in many forms. So, just because your person may not have issues with drugs and alcohol, they may have another problem that they may struggle with, which for me, in my experience, again, I found that it's just a form of self-medicating those
Correct.
emotional wounds. And so it's important that we, bring more awareness to it, because I think that I found where different social issues, but especially mental health, the stigmas tend to develop for not through lack of knowledge. When people don't understand something, they tend to create stereotypes, stigmas, or even just completely shy away and avoid those particular matters. So we're going to help with educating and bringing things to light so that you guys will definitely, have an opportunity to just learn some things tonight. And of course, Desmond and I already told him I do want to still keep it light and fun, because that's just the type of person I am. Anybody that knows me as a therapist knows that I always mix the seriousness with a little laughter and light, because that's just my personality. And I do think that that's what makes me a good therapist.
Right.
So, all right, Desmond. So the first question, I think I want to ask you, why do you think mental health intervention is challenging for men and even African Americans to embrace?
Great question. I think mental health intervention is challenging for men and black men is because as men, we are socialized to focus on the things that we do well.
Right.
And mental health and therapy calls you and challenges you to focus on the areas that are painful, challenges you to focus on the areas of your life that are unresolved, and it challenges you to understand your own behavior and how it fits into your own internalized narratives and also into the outcomes that you find problematic patterns in.
Right.
And it's so important because, like I said before, we focus on the things we do well. We don't focus on anything we don't do well. And that's a contrast to women. Women focus on the things that they don't do well. They're looking for ways to improve the things they don't do well. So whether it is, relationships and love, or, going to sex parties and figuring out how to get the right positions, they're going to figure out whatever they need to figure out to improve. Whereas men, we're not going to do that. If a man is good at basketball and his glory days were high school or college, that is the place of his arrested development. All his entire life is going to be centered around how good he was and or his ability to analyze basketball. The
Right.
same thing for people in career fields. If a man makes good money, he doesn't care about anything that he doesn't do well. All he focuses on is what he makes money in. So I think the thing about men is it's very, very difficult to get a man to acknowledge that he needs help, and then also to take that first step to get introspective enough to call forth a qualified practitioner to help him sort out his thoughts and feelings. You really have to start that habit a lot earlier in his childhood for him to understand the value of that type of a thing. It's almost like, any type of hygiene, whether it's brushing your teeth or taking showers regularly. If you don't instill that habit early, then they're not going to see the value and benefit of doing it later on in life.
Right. Okay. That's good. That's good. And so one of the reasons, and you know this, I asked you to do this live with me for tonight and to kick off this series was because just during the course of our friendship, I got to witness you experience your own journey with mental health and mental health intervention, and just kind of like the things that you discovered in the process, and how it kind of just changed and opened your eyes to different things, different perspectives, and helped you strengthen your understanding, because you do have friends, not just myself. I know you have another close friend who I love. She's also a therapist. So, I mean, it's not that you weren't already surrounded by people who work in the field, but I think it's different when you engage in it for yourself.
Absolutely.
So I definitely want you to share that experience.
Great question. Great segue. So even speaking about my own journey into mental health intervention and therapy, I started young with my mom doing family therapy, and it was great for us because we started doing it at a time where we were, in our adolescent years, and it was helpful in order to, suss out, internal family conflicts and frustrations and things like that. It was great to have a non-biased third party available to process those thoughts and feelings with. And it was also helpful for my brother at the time, who was dealing with anger issues because my dad wasn't as available to us, from a physical standpoint, being around. I mean, he was there, financially and that type of thing, but he was working so much that he wasn't able to be there on a consistent basis for us, enough for him, I'll say. So I spent time, in years past, and I even took psychology as a major, so it enabled me with the tools to better understand myself and my own behavioral processes, to understand the ABCs of mental health and experiences. So it's the affects, the behaviors, and the cognitive um, inputs to our own experiences with people and with our relationships and with ourselves. And I had taken an extended amount of time where I hadn't been doing any proactive mental health services, and I went into a very deep depression about a year and a half ago, after a loss of a job. And it was so unbearable that just getting out of bed, taking a shower, and going to the gym was an accomplishment for me. And I spent a lot of time nursing my own psychological wounds to myself. And this is part of the challenge for men is we are so used to being helpers, or we're so used to being socialized as being providers, that we don't know how to ask for help, because that makes us look weak, and being weak for a man is worse than death.
So let
So
me work in that part, because I think it's important that you're right. That's some points in how you feel. But one of the things that I recently discovered, just even by way of social media, is not even just that you guys feel that way, but even women make men feel that way. We put you all in a position to make you feel like, if you're emotional, vulnerable, or even if you cry, you're weak.
mhm,
So I've seen challenging questions posted about, if your man cried and expressed himself in this manner, what would you do? And I was really shocked that a lot of women really like hunt the men out. And they were really very critical. And I think it's crazy
mhm,
because a lot of people don't understand. It's just in my experience of working with men, because I've been blessed to, as part of my preparation and cultivating my gifts, I work for organizations that end up positioning me to primarily work with male clients. And
right.
I've had a lot of male clients who even had unresolved grief from the loss of their parents or spouse, significant other, or children. And they never grieved because they were made to feel like they couldn't even cry over the loved one. If your mom or dad dies, why can't you cry?
Mhm.
And so I work with men, since their first time crying was when they worked with me. And that was absurd, because I'm like, so what did you do at the funeral? You know what I mean? So it's like,
Sucked it up.
that we as women, we as society tend to also fuel that perception or that belief system that men are not are weak if they're anything but a provider or protector.
Right. And I will also contextualize that idea too. I would say that women are not the primary enforcers of toxic masculinity. They are secondary enforcers of toxic masculinity. So we primarily learn these things from other men. So in our formative years, we learn from other men. Boys, big boys don't cry, men don't cry. That's not something we do. And then as we get older, we learn that other women in our lives enforce those things. So when women say, stop crying like a little bitch, you know, or when women fetishize men's emotions. And what I mean by that is they get excited if a man cries at the altar on your wedding day. But if a man cries in an argument, you go to your girls and say, girl, he was crying like a little bitch, you know, that type of a thing. So, so I want to make sure that I contextualize it that men created toxic masculinity, and then because there are women who enforce it, don't mean that that's their problem to solve alone. This is actually something that men got to redress and put back. And, so, yeah,
I agree. And I don't think it is a problem for women to fix, because that's actually something you and I were just literally discussing in regards to not placing that responsibility on a woman if she's in a relationship with a man who she finds to have a certain level of brokenness. Most of the time that woman is not even equipped to help him through that healing journey. So if anything, it's more of encouraging him to seek help and letting him know that seeking help, you're going to support him, you're going to ride with him in that journey. There will be no judgment or condemnation, because you know that, one, I always tell people and I always tell my clients up front, the healing journey is never easy. It's going to take work. There will be a lot of uncomfortable moments, but to get to the end result will be so worth it.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've had to go through the healing journey. The very first time was the hardest for me, and it took years. Since mastered, the time lapse. But one thing I've learned that as you live life as an adult and you have certain experience, you're always going to, in a sense, always having to go through a healing process for something. It just will get easier as time goes on. But the one thing I've had to learn is the benefits. And I would say I've been able to experience the full benefits of living in wholeness and what it's like to do that. It doesn't mean life is perfect. It doesn't mean that you will never experience anything bad, negative, or traumatic. It just means that you're just building yourself up to be stronger, to be able to carry the new weight. One of the things I always tell my clients, what we find is, especially after we get to a certain age in our adult life, is that our emotional weight is so heavy because it's literally a stack up of events that have been taking place again,
unresolved
childhood. And so sometimes you just break and we don't even know why we break. Something as simple as a car accident that really just was the straw that
breaks the camel's back.
Yeah, and it's just like all of a sudden you just lose it and you don't even know why, but it's because you've been carrying all these things that have been building up that you really haven't been addressing. You just kind of letting it stack up in this suppression wall on the inside. And so it's important to, like you said, it's not a matter of it's the woman's responsibility to heal or fix a man. But we are, as women, should be supportive and encouraging. Because unfortunately, a lot of women are right now still resistant to even the idea of therapy. I have my car in the shop, and literally the guy that owns the shop ended up telling me that he knows he has anger issues and he's been wanting to go to counseling for not just for himself, but for marital counseling, and his wife refuses. And so he's like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, go for yourself.
Yeah.
I said, one of the things I've worked with a lot of my male clients who are married, once I start working with them and their wives see the benefit of the process, they then become more open. Because again, a lot of it just comes from when people don't understand something, they tend to avoid it. So it's not that women don't want counseling or not supportive of it, but if they don't really get it, they don't understand the process of it, it's hard for them to really be in tune and really advocate for something that they don't really understand.
Absolutely. There's actually a maxim that I go by that states, and it's actually on a meme too, and it says, I go to therapy to deal with the people in my life who refuse to. And even though that's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek statement, that it's somewhat funny and somewhat poignant, but it's also quite effective as well. Because for the people in your life, in order to most effectively deal with the people in your life, whether they're friends, family, or coworkers, the best way to deal with them is by having a third party who's non-biased to help you sort out your thoughts and feelings, and also strategize a game plan to effectively live with these people. And like you said, the people, everybody around you is going to see the benefits because they're going to see the way that you change around them. So
Right.
sometimes we get frustrated in relationships because we're constantly seeking to change another person, but
Yeah.
oftentimes we can change them when we change our own behavior, and that forces them to say, whoa, you're not getting engaged in the same cycles that we normally get engaged in. What's different?
Right.
And it's an invitation to, examine your own thought patterns.
Yeah. I mean, for me, although I'm, of course, I follow my book knowledge of the things that I was taught in school, but honestly, a lot of my approaches in my therapeutic process are based off my personal experiences. And like you said, me being able to show people, like you said, once I start seeing how my changes affected or impacted the things or the people around me, that's when it was an aha moment for me. I was able to discover, wow, like me changing, me not responding to things the way I used to, me learning how to be more watchful of my words, me learning how not to be so reactive. It shifted,
Mhm.
my relationships with my family, friends and dating, and even with my children. So for me, I once I got to live it out and walk it out, then it was easier to then, share and even help empower, others, whether they were actual clients or other people around me, to just tell them, the benefits of you working on you. Because we have to get to the point where we realize we are not in the space to change another person. That we don't have that kind of power.
Right.
So a person's change will come by way of them wanting to, and that's them in their own efforts to do that, to make that happen, to manifest that in their life. And honestly, I have to tell people you got to be okay, because sometimes in the process of their changing, they may find that they need to do some purging, and that includes purging of relationships.
Absolutely.
Of situations. So you have to be prepared for, some cutoffs.
I mean, it's part of the necessary pruning that we all have to go through in our lives. Anybody who is a horticulturist will tell you that there are certain plants and trees that have to grow, but in order for them to grow, you have to prune and cut some branches off. So um, I don't necessarily look at cutting people off as a bad thing. I look at how we do those things as a bad thing. So we live in an era right now where people brag about cutting people off, but they brag about cutting people off in a very flippant way. And I think for the benefit of us and also the people that we're in relationship with, we owe it to ourselves and the people that we care about or love or once loved to do those things in a proper way. So not everybody deserves an explanation for you distancing yourself from them, but there are enough people who do deserve an explanation so that there aren't any residual resentments or hard feelings when you part ways and cross paths again. So I think that is something that is lost in today's culture when we talk about the ease of which people are able to cut people off or brag about cutting people off.
Right, right. And it's not about, like you said, it's not about just to do it just for bragging rights, but it's just understanding if it's for your best, um, if it's for your most well-being, if it's going to be healthier for you. For some people, it's not a matter of even that they're bad, did a whole bunch of bad things to you. You just knowing that sometimes as I elevate and grow and my mindset changes and the priorities in life change, if we're not able to continue to travel this life journey together and still be on one accord or still be respectful of one another's space in life, just may need to just, part ways lovingly and just say, hey, best wishes to you.
Sure. I think it's also critical to and imperative to also understand the part that you played in the relationship, getting to a point where you have to part ways. Because a lot of times we engage in relationships that are based on codependency or enablement,
Yeah.
and we look at and realize this person is being codependent or I'm enabling them, and we don't look at our contribution to that dysfunction.
Right.
So it's important to understand, hey, in every relationship there's going to be a 50-yard line, right? There's a part that I contribute to this relationship and there's a part that you contribute to the relationship, and you have to do the necessary steps to perform an autopsy on that relationship to make sure that everybody is honoring that 50-yard line. If I'm going over too much and going crossing the 50-yard line and doing 30-yard or the 20-yard line or the 10-yard line, and I've been doing that for years, I've taught you to expect me to cover for you all the time. And it serves no purpose for me to get angry after all these years and say, I've been doing everything for you, I've been enabling you. Well, I taught you how to treat me, you know? And I think it's important to me to be able to take an inventory of the patterns that we engage with in our relationships in order to make sure that they are healthy and they are mutually beneficial.
So, I know for me growing up, there were things that I knew I was always that intuitive child that saw things that weren't right or normal, but it even particularly how they were handled.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be different, traumatic experiences from sexual abuse, domestic abuse, even seeing that you have relatives that do struggle and battle with severe depression or anxiety, or even PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our African American community, a lot of times when you and I talked about this generational thing from our grandparents to our parents, um, it just wasn't something that was really discussed. It wasn't really identified, or and so we would know things were wrong or unhealthy with someone in our family, but we really didn't want to label them. We didn't want to talk about it. So it was just like, oh, that's just the way they are. That's their mood. They'll get over it, blah blah blah.
Right.
Reality is it was not healthy.
Right.
And I'll even admit that, I endured sexual abuse during childhood, never received intervention. If anything, I just watched it be swept under the rug. So for me as a mom now, and I see a lot of things that our youth endure or go through, I have become more in tune, watching my children and being able to identify their needs to say, do they need counseling? Do they need therapy? And so now that you're a dad, and I know your baby is, really, really young, but if you saw that at some point your son may be in need of therapy because you realize there are things that he needs a little more support with, but you or his mom could not necessarily quote do everything yourself.
Sure.
What's your perspective or your belief on intervention for children?
Well, I believe in being proactive. So
Mhm.
having mental health therapy and engaging in family therapy is something I'm going to do, whether there's a crisis or not, right? Because I want to establish the habit of having a third party be available to help to contextualize his thoughts and his behaviors, and also be a safe space for him outside of me as his parent, as his dad, that he can go to and be able to unburden himself to. I want to make sure that obviously I want to activate my community, my village, to be that for him, because I've been that to my friends' kids for over the years, where they can come to me and talk to me about stuff that they don't normally talk to their parents about. and I can be that extra watchdog who I can both keep the things that they share with me in confidence, but also be vigilant if there's something serious enough that I can engage their parents on. So there's a very tight rope to walk when you have friendships with with your friends who are parents and have their relationships with their children. But I want to also establish that same thing with my son, with a therapist as well, because having the safety to say and speak your mind as a child is a priceless thing. And I think, to speak back about the intergenerational trauma, I think part of the reason why there's so much intergenerational trauma is because for generations, Black folks didn't allow children to say or speak or talk about anything that was hard. Right. And by preventing them from truly being free, there are levels and layers to it. So they were prevented from being free physically, in terms of their physically and bodily autonomy. And part of that is through corporal punishment, and then also through sexual abuse. And then the next layer to that is through manipulation, verbal threats, emotional abuse, and in preventing children from being free, it taught children to create secrets to protect themselves from their parents. And the thing about secrets is secrets make you sick. And over the years, as those secrets build up, they only produce and add to and foment the dysfunction. And then people wonder why somebody is 32 years old and they have a nervous breakdown, or why somebody is graduating from college and they're getting engaged and they should be excited, but they're having this emotional breakdown, or why somebody decides after all these years of caring for an aging parent that this person just shuts down emotionally and cuts everybody off and leaves town. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because never in this person's life were they allowed to be emotionally free, and never in this person's life were they allowed to feel what they feel and express those feelings freely. There's a high price that we have to pay as Black people, especially as children, to our elders, and that has created some very unhealthy patterns. In my own journey of achieving the maximal mental health, I had to go back and do research in my own family and discovered some patterns of mental illness in my own family that would have been great to know years ago. But because Black folks don't talk about that kind of thing, we keep that hush hush. And it's like, I've been dealing with all this stuff from all these people in my family, and I've been getting beat upside the head, and y'all could have told me, There's so many pieces of the puzzle that our loved ones have prevented from us, because in their minds, they're thinking that not talking about it's actually kind of funny. They think about not talking about it the same way Trump looks at not taking tests for COVID, right? Like, if we don't do tests for COVID, then it ain't spreading. And meanwhile, we getting lit up.
Right.
And we trying to chase down all these intergenerational traumas. We trying to chase down our own issues. We trying to chase down our own neuroses, and we're trying to make sure we don't pass that on to our own kids too. So it's a lot of work we're doing in this generation.
And you know what? I had to discover that for myself, that as I became more versed and more experienced in the field, I started to do the same thing. I started doing some backtracking and reviewing of my, family history and different patterns. And I started realizing that my family really does struggle with different forms of mental illness. I would say the primary would be depression. And then we had a couple of other relatives who had other struggles with like bipolar or different things. The problem was nobody was addressing it. Nobody was diagnosing it. And so people were just
you let it run them up.
Right. And nobody's getting help. So people are battling with these different issues and nothing is happening, and unfortunately, I had an uncle that committed suicide, so for me, I even had to discover that I was getting ready to head down this cycle of severe depression. if I hadn't caught it in time. And so what it did was it even helped me identify some things, even in my children, to start intervening on, to start teaching them to learn how to have a balanced life, to learn how to be open in their communications. You know,
Mm-hmm.
tell people with my children and I, we're very, very close. It's not a friendship type of thing where, oh, I'm your friend, but my children do know as their mom, they can still come and talk to me. And then, if there's something that they really just don't feel comfortable talking to me, we have other protective um,
Outlets.
outlets in place for them to go to. And so I made sure that they understood you don't have to only talk to me, but you have to be open to talking to someone that's going to lead you down the right path and hopefully help you provide you with healthy coping strategies in order to approach life. And I didn't want to wait until they became young adults or, like you said, until they had a nervous breakdown at 30 to want to provide intervention. The other reason was once I moved here to Georgia, it was my first time working at a mental health hospital. And the the numbers of adolescents that were coming through that hospital amazed me. I'm looking at children from age 11 because I was the youngest we could accept, age 11 through 17, just dealing with all these issues. And one of the things that really broke my heart is in the middle school years, these children are already battling with addiction because that's what they're doing to self-medicate their depression, their anxiety, things that they didn't want to talk to their parents about or didn't feel comfortable talking to their parents. And so I found myself as a therapist in hospital settings, in addiction recovery settings, having to really educate the parents on how to engage their children. They were coming in with one perspective of fix my child, but they didn't understand some of the fixing had to start from their end. So because I always tell people for youth, usually when they're behaving a certain way, they're reacting or responding to what's going on around them.
That's it.
So
and this is the part that befuddles most parents is these children live in the internet age where they have access to millions of bytes and terabytes of information that we never grew up with. And it's at their fingertips. So from everything from different types of drugs to use, different types of therapy to self-medicate themselves in ways that we never had access to. I mean, so what this does, and a lot of the parents don't know about it because in their minds, I wasn't exposed to this until this age. So I don't have to worry about this until they're like 15, 16. These kids are exposed to that at 8.
Yeah. and so it did open my eyes, even though I started having certain conversations with my children earlier than I planned to, because you're right, there were some things that I didn't plan to have, conversations with my children about until they got to a certain age. I knew junior high school was going to be the start, but to have certain conversations with them in elementary, I was like, oh, okay. Throw me for a loop, but I was willing to just flow with, the waves and the flow of the trends of what was happening. I did get a little shocked though, even as a professional, how severe the addiction crisis was rising and escalating among our youth. And you're right.
It goes to think about how ineffective the war on drugs is too.
Yes. Oh my goodness. The access to technology. Because I'm asking these kids, okay, a lot of these kids are suburban kids. Y'all not on a street corner buying a bag or anything like that. Where y'all get it from? Oh, we get off the internet. All they got
Molly, weed, syrup, X, O, anything you want.
Right. And they getting it shipped to their house. Their parents aren't checking the packages. I don't know why. Because if my child gets a package in the mail, we need to know.
Right. That's that old school parenting.
Yeah, I need to know what's in this pack. Let's open.
Look, the letter all broken up. You got some mail.
Right. So it's just interesting. I had to really, educate parents because a lot of times people in our generation tend to be so fixated on, I don't want to give my life or do things the way my parents did them. But you kind of become too liberal. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's learning how to create a balance of being more liberal than your parents and your grandparents and their upbringing, but then also still creating that structural balance of saying, okay, but look, there's some rules to this house that need to be followed,
Absolutely.
so it's important. I think it's really good that we're starting to have this conversation. And again, my focus this week is to really get the male perspective because I think it's important for people to understand that you guys have a voice and you have a lot of great things to say. So every man that I have on the lineup this week is awesome. Like I said, Desmond, of course, he's always gonna challenge your thinking. Even sometimes you can say, hey, you know what? I didn't think of it quite like that, change your perspective, but he's also open to even changing his perspective and you challenging his thinking. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to kick this series off with you. I will be having, three other gentlemen, Davon Byers, who's a former colleague of mine, but we still are kind of collaborating on some things right now in the mental health capacity for our youth. My dad and I will
Eddie.
on Wednesday, my daddy. We will do a live together, just talking about that daddy-daughter exchange and even the significance of that and that impact on your mental health as well. When your relationship with your dad is or isn't healthy. And then finally, closing it off, Kenya Cook. He's a podcaster as well, and he's very big on talking about the social issues as well. So we're also going to be talking about, again, more of the male perspective about mental health matters. So I really, really am grateful for you on tonight in this discussion. This discussion is not over. We're definitely going to have it the rest of this week. I'm looking at possibly doing this as a monthly series to where I have all the men come and all my kings. Because again, as I've already introduced myself in the beginning, my calling and purpose is primarily tied to help men heal and empower them to be the best versions of themselves and to rise up to be the kings that you guys were created to be. I love you guys. I love you, men. It has been a long journey and a road for me to even get to this space to feel comfortable speaking out on the behalf of men or to even want to connect with men to say, hey, I'm here. I'm here to help. I know, like I said, it's a unique calling for a woman to do this, but trust me, this is not a fad. This is not something I'm doing just for fun or entertainment. I've been working on this build up for the last 10 years. So like I said, anybody that knows me knows I've been kind of doing a slow build up to this point. So this is not a game for me. I'm not doing this to get popular or, become a Miss Social Media queen or whatever. This is something that I'm genuinely passionate about. I'm going to do it on or off camera regardless. So Desmond, I appreciate you for tonight. I really, really do. I'll probably have you on again because I'm sure everybody's gonna love to hear from you again. And I thank all those that watched and tuned in. And
Do I get to have a final thought or something? Like a Jerry
yeah.
Springer final minute or something?
So just for your final thought, and then we'll definitely, close it out. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Sure. I think it's imperative for men to seek therapy because traditionally we have sought therapy from our romantic interests. And I firmly believe that women are not rehabilitation centers for broken men. And I think it's high time that men take full responsibility for their emotional and mental health because pain that is not transformed is transmitted.
Yes, that was an excellent final thought. And so we'll probably replay that. That was an excellent final thought. And so again, guys, I'll be back on tomorrow at 7 p.m. with Dayground Buyers. And I look forward to seeing you guys. Please share. A lot of you guys have already started asking if you could share to different pages. Feel free to share, not just the live broadcast, but also the replay. Because we want to get this information out. It's very important that we start this conversation and continue it on in order for us to really get to some real resolutions to help heal our society. Because as you can see now, we're dealing with so much going on. And I think if our society wasn't already so broken, we wouldn't have the very severe traumatic responses that we're having right now. So it's important that we really address that and start to heal our land. So thank you guys. I love you. I'm Kiana Howell from Empower to Heal, and I will see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.